Will Stop and Frisk ever end? So I have this next clip is going to be on this article. Bam. Stop and Frisk never really ended. Now it's gone digital by Alice Sperry. And this talks about how even under Mayor de Blasio, who ran on Stop and Frisk, they have continued a version of it. This article talks about, here's one person, Bell, he was from an upper Manhattan subway station on one evening 3 years ago when an unmarked police car pulled up behind Teron Bell. 4 officers in plain clothes surrounded him on the sidewalk, ordering him to turn around against a gate so that he could search him. Bell complied and the officers found nothing on him, but they then demanded his ID, telling him that they were looking for guns and doing a warrant check. I didn't have any warrants, Bell told The Intercept. I was a bit confused, like, why were they searching me? So basically the new Stop and Frisk is a digital one where they pull you over and ask for your ID. They swipe your ID card and they would look for if you have any warrants or anything in any database so that they could then fill their quota and bring you in if you did have a warrant. But as we can see, this is an unconstitutional procedure because it's basically searching for no reason. They had no reason to search you.
It violates your Fourth Amendment unreasonable search and seizure. I mean, if they're stopping you for no reason, and this has been going on since the beginning of time, and you know who are the people that are affected? It's people that are black and brown, and it's very scary because I was stopped recently, actually not recently, probably like 8 months ago, and a cop said I fit a description of something that happened, and they were like, "Oh, you fit a description," and I go, "Well, it wasn't me." He goes, "Give me your ID," and I'm lucky that I have Spanish privilege, light skin privilege, whatever you want to call it. It's not white because I don't think I'm white, but I was able to this cop say, "I'm not going to give you my ID if you have a witness nearby, or if you have something that says that they can ID me, or if you could go check cameras nearby or something like that." And the guy really didn't want to. Finally, the person who I put in the complaint came by and said, "Yeah, that's not him." And I was able to not give my ID that whole time, staying respectful and but just saying, "I'm just not going to give it to you." And it's not going to happen. So I'm not, but I'm lucky in that. I can't give that as advice to everybody because I felt safe in that moment. I felt like I'm not going to get thrown on the floor and have my face busted open, or I'm not going to get shot in this moment. But for somebody who's fearing for their life and the cops right there, that's probably not the best advice. And it's very sad because they'll tell you that they'll beat you up and then what's going to happen after you're dead? They're going to pay your family a settlement. Like,
you're lucky they didn't find your warrants. They found your ID.
They didn't get to run my ID because I didn't get them.
They would have found your warrants.
Yeah.
The practice appears to be sanctioned by the NYPD itself. The lawsuit notes with officers sometimes telling the individual they stopped that they were just following procedure, quote unquote. The lawsuit accused department officials of failing to properly train and supervise officers on the legality of these searches.
Yeah, this is exactly the point I was going to make. You know, like we hear always talking about New York finance, the NYPD. It feels like every other week we're talking about something that department they just think that they are bigger than anyone and they could do no wrong. They could get away with everything. And we know, like Gabe said, we know, black and brown people. Like if you drive a Honda Civic, they automatically gonna be like, there's a Spanish guy there, let's pull him over and let's just figure out what we find out just because the car that you drive. So It's not nothing new and it's always been there.
So I was literally in the car with one of my best friends when he got a driving while black stop. So people will know, and black brothers and sisters out there many of them can relate to this, but I witnessed it. I'm in the car and we're driving down one of the main streets, and the cop from the opposite side of the street busts a hard U-turn, comes and stops the car. We were driving on the way to the airport, dropping off a couple friends. So it was 4 of us in the car, 3 Spanish and 1 black. And the black dude was the driver. And so they get his license. They do this. He ends up getting, I want to say it was something like 4 or 5 tickets. Wow. But none of the tickets that he got were for any moving violation or anything that could have caused the cop to turn him to stop in that moment. It's not like he was speeding. It's not like he had a headlight out. He got bald tires. He got expired registration. He got like 3 or 4 things. But granted, those are his fault and whatever. But there was no justification in that stop for them to make that stop. They literally, it was the hardest U-turn I ever seen. Like if we were like suspects in a murder, it was crazy. So
we know that this driving while black it's a fact. And one of the reasons we know this because after Mike Brown got murdered in Ferguson, there was a lot of investigations that were done by the Justice Department, and they found out, and they found it elsewhere too, that the stops for Black people went down at night because they couldn't tell. The cops couldn't tell they were Black or white in the daytime, at nighttime. So in the daytime, they could see they were Black, and there were a lot more stops that were, for nothing, versus the nighttime where it was more even between Black and white people. So we know this.
Florida, what was the cops? They pulled over the DA.
2 Florida police officers are facing scrutiny for pulling over Aramis Ayala, who happens to be the first Black state attorney elected in Florida history.
What agency you with?
I'm the state attorney.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Your tag didn't come back. Never seen that before. I'm sorry? Yeah. We're good now.
And then after she, told who she was and she got their name, they were like, "Oh, you could go." And they still couldn't figure it out. So.
That was State Attorney Aramis Ayala was pulled over by Orlando police.
I want to play a game with you guys. I didn't tell you about this. So this is part of something that's called predictive policing. So is basically just telling the cops, just look where you've been looking already. It's a minority neighborhood. In 2016, there was a ProPublica article that I read where they talk about same thing, but this was about predictive policing, where it came to when somebody got arrested, looking at their records, they ask them questions and see their history to give them a score of how risky they were, how likely they were to reoffend. And that report will be given to a judge, and they will determine whether, they'll either let go on their own reconnaissance, they're going to get bail, or they're going to get, put in jail until their trial comes up. I'm going to give you a couple examples now. This one is 2 petty theft arrests. So this one guy, he got stopped 2 armed robberies and an attempted armed robbery. And number 2 have 4 juvenile misdemeanors. Okay, which one is the higher risk, you think?
So we got 4 juvenile misdemeanors, and what was the other one?
2 armed robberies and an attempted armed robbery. So 2 actual robberies and 1 attempted.
Well, I see where we're going here.
Yeah, the 2 armed robbery. The 2 armed robbery was probably a white person, and the 4 juvenile thing was a Black guy. And the higher risk is the Black guy.
Right. So the armed robbery was a white guy. He got a risk of 3.
Yep.
And the 4 misdemeanors was a Black woman, and she got a risk of 8. And afterwards, however long they followed them, there were no subsequent offenses for the risky woman, but the white guy had a grand theft afterwards.
Yep.
So their prediction, their machine bias, because the programmers, they just, whether consciously or subconsciously, they program their own biases into it.
Of course.
So I'm gonna give you another one. So I'm gonna make it a little harder. Now I'm gonna tell you, it's a white guy, and he got a prior offense was attempted burglary, and the Black guy got resisting arrest without violence. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I want you to tell me
he got a 7. The resisting arrest without violence got a 7. The armed robbery got a 4.
A 1.
Okay. The attempted burglary got a 3.
Oh,
And the resisting arrest without violence got a 10.
What?
Got a 10. But look at this.
Yo.
Done.
The guy that was with the attempted burglary, he was rated low, even though he was arrested with cocaine and marijuana when he got arrested.
Wow, and he got a 3.
And subsequently, he had 3 more drug possession charges afterwards. So that should tell you what these, predictive policing things does. And one of the people that is big right now in this thing is Peter Thiel. He's a jerk from Silicon Valley, and his company Palantir, and he's very close with Trump. And he got a lot of government contracts, and they're using his data mining software into these kind of things right now. So it's a money making deal to arrest Black people.
So let me show you guys one more thing over here on the website, because I want to bring up. I don't want to let Mayor De Blasio. Remember, he ran as a big progressive when he ran for president, and we knew. I mean, he was in the progressive tier, but I feel like he wasn't a real progressive to a certain extent. But
he's one of those, I have a Black friend I have a.
Well, he has a black
family
son.
type
That's what he
progressives.
used to become married. He's like, I have a black son with a big afro, and listen to this.
Yeah, but before you even go there, I don't think we know New York history of selecting mayors, right? Giuliani, Bloomberg. Now this guy, I don't think New York City.
You know what? I
really...
gotta give De Blasio credit for passing free. I believe it was free childcare in New York City. So I gotta give him that. But let me read this part. During De Blasio's first term, Black and Latinos New Yorkers accounted for more than 90% of reported stops in at least 30 precincts, and for a majority of the stops, even in mostly white neighborhoods. In 2019, the number of reported stops was up by more than 20% over the previous year, and the number of stops critics warn is underreported. So even under Mayor de Blasio, it went down drastically, the stop and frisk, but we see it creeping back up. And then one more thing I want to mention is with the George Floyd and the defund the police movement, New York City got a lot of pressure. De Blasio got a lot of pressure to do something, to defund the police. One of the things that they did was disband the plainclothes police. But as we saw in this article, it talked about how they are still plainclothes police pulling people over and checking their IDs. So that's still going on, even after they say they disbanded it. They're never going to be happy with
de Blasio, because one thing I read was even under him, the New York gang database expanded by 70% under him. They're just, and if you just happen to live in a neighborhood that's a gang member, they automatically add you to it pretty much. Yeah. And they still hate him, even though he hasn't done much against the cops.
This just goes to show you that when you're weak, they just going to trample you.
The police union didn't. They endorsed Trump, didn't they? The NYPD.
Hey, yep, you're absolutely right. So in the comments below, if you have any thoughts, have you been pulled over in your respective area, and where they stop and frisk, whether they pull you over for no reason, they ask for your ID? If you know the story, put it in the comments below. We'll be interested in hearing it. Like and subscribe.